Now, to help us look back at that landmark speech, I have Dr. Jung-yeop from the Sejong Institute joining me in the studio today. Dr. thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure.
It's been quite a year in inter-Korean affairs over the last 12 months. Who would have guessed that all these changes might have happened?
Right.
You know, since President Moon gave that speech in Berlin. First, can you explain to our viewers, though, what he laid out during that speech?
At the Berlin last year, President Moon Jae-in proposed this Berlin initiative to achieve the ultimate goal of inter-Korean relations and peace talks and also the North and South economic cooperation. So to achieve those goals, he laid out 4 initiatives, which includes that to have North Korea participate in Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, and second, a suspension of all hostile acts along the DMZ, and resumption of the talks between high-level government officials, including summits, and President Moon Jae-in tried to lay out those goals while it was a midst of a crisis caused by North Korea's provocations, including missile tests.
So of those, he achieved quite a lot of those ambitions that he laid out for the inter-Korean relations. How do you rate his progress on that?
Yeah, one of the initiatives he mentioned was a family reunion, which was scheduled to have in August. And North Korea already participated in Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang early this year. And we removed the loudspeakers along the DMZ, and North Korea responded in the same way, even though there are a lot of ways to improve the military relations between two Koreas. And third, that we already had 2 summits. And also the high-level talks, military talks, and all the sports talks. So all those 4 initiatives were achieved this year already, even though there was a criticism last year that was too far-fetched, because it was among the crises caused by North Korea. But 1 year later, President Moon Jae-in achieved all those 4 initiatives.
So President Moon achieved those initiatives, but how important actually was it that North Korea decided to come on board? Because after the speech, for 6 months, it didn't seem like there was going to be any change. But then at the Kim Jongun's New Year's address, he kind of seemed to have flipped a switch and opened the possibilities for all these things to happen. How important was that the North Korea who took the lead on this as well?
So I think that we should think this accomplishment of 4 initiatives is the beginning of the long process. It does not mean that accomplishment of those 4 initiatives completes President Moon Jae-in's goal with regard to the inter-Korea relations. So there are a lot of things to be achieved in the future, but these 4 initiatives laid out good foundations for the future relations between two Koreas. So we still don't know how far North Korea is going to cooperate with South Korea, all these projects, but accomplishment of those 4 initiatives shows a good sign that North and South can get along in the future if there are more progress in the denuclearization and the human rights issue in North Korea.
So President Moon laid out those 4 initiatives, but he also laid out a few other ambitions that he wanted for the 2 Koreas as well. For example, the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, and as well establishing a permanent peace regime, which is one of the things he pointed out. So of these things, these are some things he hasn't been able to achieve. I mean, what does he need to work on now going forward?
Yes, President Moon Jae-in mentioned during the speech that to achieve those ultimate goals, like denuclearization of North Korea and to have the peace treaty between two Koreas, that the first initial initiatives are those 4 things: the family reunion, suspension of the hostile military act. So those things can be foundation for the progress to the peace talks and the denuclearization. So as I just mentioned, that those 4 initiatives are just beginning in the process of achieving those ultimate goals, which includes denuclearization and the peace talks in Korea. So we have to see and how these 2 issues can be evolving in the future.
The problem is, it seems that he's not, the Moon administration, they're not in control of what they can do. For example, there are international sanctions on North Korea, which limits the scope of what they can do. How does he work on that? What does he need to do? Like, how is he limited by all this?
So President Moon Jae-in acknowledged the limit of how far he can do with regard to the improving the inter-Korea relations. Because to improve the inter-Korean relations, it inevitably involves the economic cooperation between two Koreas, and most of the economic cooperation between two Koreas are limited by the international sanctions imposed onto North Korea. Because international sanctions and the unilateral sanctions by United States, EU, and South Korea is targeting North Korea's nuclear weapon, WMD programs, and human rights. So as we just talked that, those two issues are not resolved yet. So unless those two issues, which are denuclearization and the human rights improvement in North Korea are resolved, it is very unlikely that international sanctions are going to be lifted. So with the international sanctions intact, it is very difficult for South Korean government to unilaterally propose any economic cooperation with North Korea. So there are certain things that we can do, but there are strong limitations on processing economic cooperation with North Korea at this stage.
Lifting those economic sanctions also rests actually with the negotiations that North Korea needs to do with the US over denuclearization, because without denuclearization, they're not going to lift the international sanctions. I mean, so essentially, if you look at it one way, South Korea's relationships with North Korea, what Moon Jae-in has laid out, perhaps is dependent on the US negotiations for denuclearization. Would you agree?
Yes. So the ultimate resolution of the nuclear issue of North Korea will be dependent on how the discussion is going on between the United States and North Korea. But South Korea should not be left out in the discussion, because there are roles that South Korean government can play. Because now, with all the talks between U.S. and South Korea, U.S. and North Korea, there was South Korean government's role. Because as we can see that the first talks between the U.S. and North Korea were initiated by South Korean government. So I think South Korean government can still play a role to convince North Korea that the bright future is when North Korea is actually denuclearized, because that's when the U.S. is going to agree to lift the sanctions on North Korea. So I think that the South Korea is not left out. There are still roles that South Korean government can play.
But still, there has been definitely, since the Berlin Declaration, a lot of changes between the US and North Korea, and South Korea and North Korea as well. And I guess one of the key examples of that would be what's happening right now is the inter-Korean basketball games that are happening in Pyongyang, not far from here actually. But then the North Korean leader himself, Kim Jongun, he was nowhere to be seen in the first game, unfortunately, and it seems like he's not going to be there today either. What do you make of that? So, I mean, firstly, what do you make of the actual games itself, the basketball games?
I think that this is also a good beginning in two-Korea relations. And the official reason that the Chairman Kim was not attending the game was that he is going to be somewhere in the field to give directions in the field constructions. But another reason for him not to attend the basketball game this time is that he's going to meet U.S. Secretary Pompeo, and that is probably about the denuclearization issues of North Korea, which is very critical for North Korea. So I think that even the basketball game is very important for inter-Korean relations, but as he is going to have to meet Secretary Pompeo with regard to the denuclearization, I think that is why Chairman Kim is not attending the game today.
I guess it is only a basketball game, and compared to the denuclearization talks, they won't take precedent. But one of the interesting things was, along with the basketball team that went from South Korea, the unification minister also went, and he seems to have met one of the top officials in North Korea, Kim Yong-chol as well, and they're said to have exchanged messages with each other. What do you think that would have entailed? Will President Moon have sent a message to give to Kim Jong-un?
I think that there are certain messages that President Moon wants to relay through Minister Cho Myung-kyun this time to Chairman Kim. But we don't know what that is. However, I think President Moon probably emphasized that the U.S. is very suspicious of North Korea's intention these days because after June 12th summit in Singapore, North Korea and the United States has not really initiated the talks about the denuclearization process of North Korea. So there was a concern raised in the United States. And South Korean government is aware of that U.S. government's concern very much. So I think that via Minister Cho Myung-kyun, President Moon delivered a message to Chairman Kim that there was a concern from the United States. So it might be great if Chairman Kim can resolve those concerns when he meets Secretary Pompeo this time.
We've actually got news that he is now on his way to Pyongyang. He has left Washington, and he will be there either later today or probably tomorrow, it seems that way. How do you think the talks will go? There's a lot going on here. It seems like it's going to be one of the most important talks to actually get to the details, to hash out the real details of denuclearization. What do you think can be achieved here?
As I just mentioned, that there was a concern within the United States that there was no serious negotiation between the United States and North Korea about the nuclear issue of North Korea after the summit on June 12th. So I think that this time it is very unlikely that Secretary Pompeo is going to have some product with regard to the detailed process of denuclearization of North Korea. So I think that the first thing that they can agree on is the process of repatriation at the missing U.S. soldiers during the Korean War. And second, maybe President Pompeo is going to say that there was a firm willingness of North Korea with regard to its nuclear program, but I don't know how far they can agree on the detailed process of denuclearization because so far Secretary Pompeo does not know who his counterpart is for the negotiating process. That means that North Korea is not really ready for the negotiation yet. So it would be great if Secretary Pompeo come back with a good product on the denuclearization issues, but I think this time it's not very likely.
But isn't there pressure on him to bring back something? I mean, President Trump has promised all this, that there's no more nuclear threat and they're going to denuclearize. But so far, North Korea doesn't seem to have shown any intention that they are willing to do it. In fact, there is evidence to suggest that they're continuing to enrich uranium and expand their missile programs. Doesn't North Korea now need to show something as well?
So I think that President Trump and Secretary Pompeo is under pressure from the Congress and the public and from the group of experts because all those promises made during the summit has not been met yet. Even the conversations between the countries has not started yet with regard to the North Korea's nuclear program. So as you just mentioned, that there are strong pressure. And North Korea probably knows that. So maybe there is something that North Korea can provide to Secretary Pompeo this time, which might include that dismantlement of the testing site of the missile engines. So maybe that's the kind of things that North Korea can provide to Secretary Pompeo, that they want to extend the period of the negotiation, but they would not, I don't believe that they would give a firm answer about the process of denuclearization.
Before we go back to the Berlin Declaration about a year ago, so everything, US and North Korea relations were poor, and then Kim Jongun seemed to have switched, as I said earlier, his decision to reopen relations with the US and South Korea. There's a lot of interpretation of why he suddenly did this, and one of the reasons is, it seems to be that he wants to improve his regime economically, the economic situation there. Do you buy that argument?
Yeah, there are two arguments. First one surfaced in January and February was that North Korea is feeling very damaged because of the sanctions imposed onto North Korea. So they have to resolve that issues. And second, North Korea is trying to make a strategic shift from the nuclear armament to economic development. So we don't know yet which arguments actually explains Kim Jong-un's recent shift on his strategy. So we have to see how he comes to the negotiation table with the United States on the declaration. Then we can more clearly explain his intention behind this.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you for your insights as usual.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you next time.
Thank you.